Imagine just one ingredient, something that over centuries became maybe more valuable than gold, sparked wars, totally reshaped economies. Could something as, well, as humble as sugar really hold that much power? Secretly shaping our societies, our diets, even who we think we are. Welcome to this deep dive. This is where we dig into your sources, pull out the key insights, the really important stuff, to help you get genuinely well informed. Today we're looking at Sidney W. Mintz's incredible book, Sweetness and Power. Mintz, people call him the father of food anthropology. He was at Yale, Johns Hopkins. His work is deeply respected, by economists, humanities scholars, everyone really. So our mission today is to unpack his big argument, how sugar went from this super rare elite thing to being absolutely everywhere, affecting class, food, the global economy, even our social lives. It's quite a lens on history. Mintz kicks things off by, making us question our basic ideas about food. We don't often think about how our eating habits, what we eat, how we eat. It's not just about fuel, is it? It's about who we are.
Exactly. That's a core point. He really argues that food choices are, deeply tangled up with cultural identity, social status, all of that. Our tastes, our preferences, they're shaped by culture, by class, by the groups we belong to. What we eat helps define us.
Yeah, you see it all the time, right? Like, think about a national dish. It's not just the food itself. It's history, it's community, the flavors, the recipes. They bring back memories, tell stories. It really shows how food shapes us, how it connects us.
Mintz puts it so well. He says something like, the essence lies in the physical act of eating together, a bond created simply by partaking of food, linking human beings. It's this really fundamental connection.
So food isn't just fuel, it's identity. Got it. But here's the really kind of mind-bending part. How did sugar, which was basically unknown for ages, jump from being exotic and rare to, something we practically need every day? Mintz tracks this whole transformation, sucrose becoming a total staple in England by the 1800s.
And that brings up a huge question, doesn't it? Okay, maybe we're hardwired to like sweet things. That seems innate. But Mintz really pushes on this. How much of our relationship with sweetness is actually learned, shaped by culture, by history, not just biology.
Right. So if sugar got this powerful grip, where did it even begin? And what were the sort of harsh realities behind its spread across the globe?
Well, the story really starts with sugarcane. It was first domesticated way back in New Guinea. But the first solid evidence of actual sugar-making techniques pops up around 500 AD in India. From India, it spread mostly through Arab conquests, reaching Europe. And the Arabs were key here. They had advanced irrigation, better techniques for processing the cane. They really spread it around. But in Europe, initially, it was purely a luxury item. Super exclusive. Its popularity really took off after the Crusades, though. That led to some early attempts to grow it in places like Venice, Spain, Portugal.
Okay, but this sweet story, it takes a really dark turn, doesn't it? The history of sugar is tied up with some pretty brutal stuff. Immense human cost.
Oh, absolutely. When cultivation shifted to the New World, the Spanish tried setting up plantations in the Caribbean, but they struggled. It wasn't really until the forced labor of enslaved Africans was brought in that production just exploded. Then the British and French colonies, they took it even further with these huge industrial-scale plantation systems, an entire economy built on exploitation. Yeah, there's a powerful quote Mintz includes, actually, from Karl Marx about this connection. It's something like, without slavery, no cotton; without cotton, no modern industry. He goes on to link slavery directly to the value of colonies, world trade, and large-scale industry. And if you think about the bigger picture, the forced migration of millions of enslaved Africans, and then later indentured laborers from India and elsewhere. It fundamentally changed global populations, all driven by the demand for this one single commodity, sugars.
Wow. So you're talking about a whole global capitalist system essentially being welded together back in the 17th century. The demand for sugar in, say, England, directly fueling the horrors of slave labor in the colonies. Stark. That link between consumption and production. Okay, so we understand the production side. Pretty grim history there. But how did something produced at such cost, human and financial, become so incredibly common, so ubiquitous in our daily lives?
It's kind of astonishing, isn't it? Mintz actually says, for people living today, sugar is so familiar, so common, it is difficult to imagine a world without it. But then he flips it. Only a few centuries ago, it would have been equally difficult to imagine a world so rich in sugar. In England, it was basically unheard of until the 12th century. And even then, it was just for the super wealthy. Used more like a spice or even medicine at first.
Right. It's fascinating how its uses changed over time. First medicine, then a spice or condiment, even for savory food.
Yeah.
Then this decorative material for fancy feasts and a preservative before it became primarily just a sweetener.
Exactly. And that big shift, becoming a widespread sweetener in Britain, that was a huge dietary change around the late 18th century. It happened right alongside the arrival of these new drinks, tea, coffee, chocolate, which came in around the 17th century. Those drinks are often bitter on their own, right? So they became perfect vehicles for people to consume more and more sugar.
So that raises a really key question then. How did sugar go from being this luxury item for the elite to basically a daily necessity for the working class? And what does that reveal about the huge social and economic shifts happening during those centuries? Okay, so what does all this mean in terms of power? How did sugar become this subtle tool of social and political influence, shaping society almost without anyone noticing?
Well, Mintz gives us two really helpful concepts here: inside meanings and outside meanings. So inside meanings are about the personal rituals, the social practices around food, how foods start to symbolize cultural norms, group identity. He talks about how this evolves through intensification and extensification.
Okay, let me see if I get this. Intensification is the elites use sugar in super fancy, expensive ways first, setting a trend, showing status. And then extensification is when that idea kind of trickles down and maybe the lower classes adopt it, but in their own way, making it accessible. So it's not just copying, it's adapting it. Is that right?
That's exactly it. Perfect. So picture the elite with these incredibly elaborate sugar sculptures at feasts, or using it as a rare spice that's intensification, status symbol. Then the working class couldn't afford that, obviously. They started putting sugar in their tea, maybe eating cheap jams or pastries. They took the idea of sugar, that symbol, and made it part of their everyday lives, their own rituals. That's extensification. Think about how sugar became common in, say, wedding cakes or funeral foods for everyone. It shows that shift from a remote status symbol to something deeply meaningful but shared in daily life.
Right. And then the outside meanings, that's more about the bigger picture, how rulers or the economic system can use food and its meaning to keep control.
Precisely. And Mintz uses this phrase, pacific domination. It sounds a bit academic, but the idea is powerful. It means controlling both the food itself and the meanings people attach to it. It can be a way to maintain power without using obvious force. It's quieter, but maybe even more effective in shaping society. And crucially, Mintz stresses this wasn't just people suddenly deciding they liked sugar. Its rise was driven by economics and politics. Specifically, slavery and colonialism fueled its integration into British life. It created this direct, almost unbreakable link between the forced labor of Africans in the colonies and what ordinary English workers were eating and drinking every day.
And this whole system created political shifts too, right? Competition between plantation owners, merchants, consumers pushing for cheaper prices. It led to changes in policy, from protectionism like tariffs to more free market ideas, which in turn just encouraged more mass consumption of sugar. And at the same time, it kind of propped up the existing class structure by providing cheap calories for the industrial workforce.
Yeah, it's a complex web. Now, while Mintz's argument about these deep structures, economic exploitation, cultural symbolism is incredibly compelling. It is worth asking, maybe just pondering, does it sometimes simplify things a bit too much? What about individual choice? Maybe thinkers like Jean Baudrillard, who wrote about consumer society, have a point too. Sometimes consumer choices are about expressing personal identity or maybe even small acts of resistance within the system.
Ah, that's interesting. So are you saying Mintz's view might be too deterministic? Or just that maybe Baudrillard adds another layer we should consider, how people interact with what they buy and consume?
I think it's more the latter. Mintz gives us this amazing framework for the big systemic forces. And maybe Baudrillard just reminds us that even inside those big systems, individual choices, even if they're constrained, still shape meaning in small ways. It adds nuance.
Okay, so let's fast forward. By 1900, sugar isn't just common. Mintz says it's essential to the British diet. Everyone's consuming it daily. What did that actually look like?
Well, it was everywhere. In jams, pastries, biscuits, puddings, and of course in sweetened tea, which was hugely important. You really saw how vital it had become during World War I rationing, especially for poorer families who'd come to rely on it as a cheap, easy source of energy, of calories. Taking it away was a big deal.
It's also interesting how different countries adopted it at different paces, isn't it? The US apparently had a much bigger sweet tooth earlier on than Britain or France.
Yeah, France is a surprising case. They had sugar colonies, but their consumption lagged behind. Mintz suggests it's largely because their culture was so centered around wine. Less room, perhaps, for sugary drinks and foods compared to Britain or the US. It really shows how deep-seated cultural habits affect these big dietary shifts.
Okay, so thinking about how widespread it became, it leads to a deeper question, doesn't it? How did sugar sort of pave the way for our modern eating habits, maybe even change how we interact socially around food?
Mintz definitely sees a connection. He talks about this big shift away from traditional communal meals towards more individual eating patterns. Think about the rise of prepared foods, fast food, that whole dynamic. It led to fewer ritualistic meals, fewer meals eaten together around a table. And technology and food production played a huge role in that. As food prep moved out of the home and into factories, he argues, those communal aspects started to fade. Individual choices became more common, often based on convenience, maybe price, rather than shared tradition or even nutritional quality. Yeah, Mintz ends the book with this really thoughtful line. He's something like, to move from so minor a matter as sugar to the state of the world may seem like yet another chorus of the Bone Song. He's kind of acknowledging that connecting one small thing like sugar to huge global history might sound, well, almost cliche, like a song we've heard before. But his whole book shows that for sugar, it's not simple at all. It's this incredibly complex, world-changing story.
Absolutely. As we've seen, sugar's impact is just immense. It went from being, just a plant chemical to driving global economies, symbolizing status, being a tool of power, reshaping diets, societies, even our sense of self. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we think about sugar's path from luxury to everyday staple, tied to trade, identity, consumption, what other seemingly simple things in our lives might have equally complex, powerful histories hidden beneath the surface? Histories that shape us in ways we just don't usually stop to consider.